Okay. Other for AGI deductions. So these are again ones that are above the line, what we call those, that typically happen that help actually reduce your adjusted gross income. One is the educator expense. Always, if you know that your client is a teacher, um, and it has to be K through 12, can be others, but mostly not professors. We don't get this, but basically, it's eligible educators can deduct up to $250 for unreimbursed cost of classroom materials. This includes books, computer equipment, any kind of material basically, as a deduction in arriving at AGI. We find out that most educators do end up spending this on their students, and again, thank you for that. An eligible educator is a kindergarten through grade 12 teacher, instructor, counselor, principal, or aide for at least 900 hours a school year in a school that provides elementary or secondary education. If a married, filing jointly couple are both educators, their deduction is up to $500, but it's never more than $250 per spouse. Okay, $250 is the limit, but it is a good one just to throw on for any teacher that you know of that again teaches K through 12, or counselor, principal, or aide. Again, that does at least 900 hours of a school year. Nice. Anyway, next one. Unreimbursed business expense for performing artists and others. Another one that ends up happening. And there is 3 different types of taxpayers eligible for deducting this expense. So, performing artists who worked for at least 2 employers during the year. So they have to work for at least 2. Received at least $200 each for any 2 of those employers. And had business expense of more than 10% of gross income. And an AGI of $16,000 or less. After deducting those expenses. Okay? That's an interesting one. I haven't seen much of that, and that's mostly because of the area that I do taxes in. We don't have a lot of performing artists, but if you're looking at New York City or Austin, we'd probably say Austin. You probably have a little bit more of this. Again, depends on location when some of these hit. Now, number 2, National Guard or Reserve members who travel more than 100 miles away from home in connection with services in the reserves. That's one you probably see more often. And then, of course, state or local fees-based government officials. Okay, I would see the National Guard or Reserve members more often than either of the other 2. But again, we have to know that all 3 of these in particular can hit. Performing artists is just a little bit more complicated. And then finally, the other one that we have was moving expenses. Now, before 2018, mostly everybody could qualify as long as it was like 40 miles away from your previous residence. But under the TCJA Act, this has repealed the ability for taxpayers to deduct job-related moving expense unless you are a member of the armed forces pursuant to a military order and permanent change of station. So only the military are allowed for this moving expense after 2018. So, no worries, can't take moving expenses anymore. So another poll. So let's see what you think here. Glenn and Iris Holland are a married couple that files jointly and both are high school teachers. So we know that we probably will have the education expense. Glenn and Iris spent $270 and $120 on various school supplies respectively. After reviewing the records, you explained that the Hollands that they are eligible for a $370 educator expense for AGI deductions. Since some of the supplies they purchased could easily be used by either one of them, they have reclassified some of the receipts so that Glenn now spends $240 and Iris $150. Again, to make sure that both of them are under that $250 limit. And they want to claim the $390 educator expense for AGI deduction. As a paid preparer, would you sign their form? Would you? Well, again, this is up to you. This does seem somewhat questionable because they basically changed as soon as I gave them a number for $20. But the argument could be made for signing the form. Why? Well, if the Hollands can document that some supplies were shared and may have been used by either one of them, then yes, they could qualify for the $390 education expense. Again, their job is to prove to the IRS. Our job as a paid preparer is pretty much a lot of times taking their word. As long as they provide us with documentation to us, it seems reasonable, we're okay. It's usually the client that will have to approve of numbers. If we tell them this is what the client gave us, in a case of an audit, again, the client gave us this. This is their information. This is the conversation. Boom. It'll go straight to the client. IRS will go, okay, prove it with the receipts. Or prove it a different way. Again, they'll ask them to actually prove it. Okay, so that finishes up this little part. I want to do a little easy one. We had two big parts already. And next, we're going to start hitting itemized deductions. And the first one is the big bad one, medical expense. Okay, so I will see you for the next part.